Good evening. I'm Dr. Rehna Salam, DNB resident in pediatrics in GKNM Hospital in Coimbatore, and I'm here for the case discussion session on puberty menorrhagia under the guidance of Dr. Ahila ma'am and Dr. Archana ma'am. The learning objectives of this session include that puberty menorrhagia is a common menstrual disorder in adolescents. It can present as an emergency with hemodynamic instability. Hence, pediatricians should be able to evaluate and manage these girls. Starting with the history, a 13-year-old adolescent girl presented to us with a history of heavy menstrual bleeding since 8 days. She had attained her menarche 10 days ago. On day 1 and day 2, she had to change 3 to 4 pads per day. From day 3, because the bleeding was more profuse, she changed pads more frequently. And on day 9 and 10, there was profuse bleeding. She changed an extra large pad every 1.5 hours and was pouring out large clots. There was history of pain in the lower abdomen. On the day prior to admission, she complained of excessive fatigue, headache, and associated postural giddiness. Past history. Since 8 years of age, it was noticed that she had swelling and bluish discoloration of skin following trauma and IM injections, but was not evaluated. She was diagnosed to have hypothyroidism at 10 years of age with a TSH of more than 100 milli international unit per liter. She was started on thyroxine 50 microgram once daily and was hiked to 75 microgram OD. She was on regular follow-up. There was no history of trauma. There was no history of hospital admissions or long-term intake of other medications. Family history, there was no known history of bleeding disorders, menstrual disorders, hypothyroidism, or any other chronic disease in the family. Antenatally, her mother was diagnosed to have gestational diabetes mellitus in the 3rd trimester and was started on insulin. She was delivered full term by LSCS in view of LGA baby with a birth weight of 4.5 kilogram, and the neonatal period was uneventful. She was developmentally normal and immunized for age, and there was no history of discoloration at the injection sites during routine immunizations until 5 years of age. On examination, she was tired, pale, conscious and oriented, comfortable at rest. Peripheral pulses were well felt. Petechia were present over the neck, abdomen, hands and legs. Mild acanthosis nigricans was present at the nape of neck. No lymphadenopathy, and thyroid examination was normal with no enlargement. Vitals showed that she had tachycardia with a pulse rate of 122 per minute, respiratory rate of 26 per minute, BP of 130/52 millimeters of mercury, with a capillary refill time less than 3 seconds. She was febrile with a temperature of 98.4 degree Fahrenheit and was maintaining 99% saturation in room air. Anthropometry, she had a height of 153 centimeter, which fell on the 50th centile, and a weight of 53.5 kilogram, which was between 75th and 90th centile. She was overweight with a BMI of 22.85 kilogram per meter square, and she had a body surface area of 1.5 meter square. Systemic examination was normal, except for a hemic murmur, which is heard in the aortic area. Summarizing, an adolescent girl born to non-consanguineous parents with history of EC bruising since 8 years of age, known hypothyroid, has now presented to us with mucocutaneous bleeds, menorrhagia and pallor in compensated shock. Her initial reports showed that there was anemia with hemoglobin of 5.7 gram per deciliter. PCV was 17.5. She had thrombocytopenia with a platelet count of 47,000. Peripheral smear showed microcytic hypochromic anemia with anisocoagular cytosis, thrombocytopenia with giant platelets. On further workup, it was found that serum iron and serum ferritin levels were low and serum iron binding capacity was high. So these, along with the peripheral smear findings, were suggestive of iron deficiency anemia. Serum folate and serum vitamin B12 levels were within normal limits. Reticulocytes count was 6.6%, and it showed that the bone marrow was functioning adequately. Direct Coombs test was 3+ positive. ANA by IF method was 1+ positive. So she was planned for ANA profile on a later date. Coagulation profile, liver function test, renal function test, and serum electrolytes were all normal. Ultrasound abdomen and pelvis was also reported normal. Thyroid function test was mildly deranged, but it could be because there was history of missing of a few pills recently. During the hospital stay, because she was in compensated shock, she was immediately started on IV fluids, and 2 units of packed red blood cells was transfused on an emergency basis. IV tranexamic acid 500 milligram was started and continued 8th hourly, and with that alone, the bleeding did get controlled. Combined OCPs were started as advised by the gynecologist, but after the first dose, it was changed to norethistron 5 milligram TDS as per endocrinology opinion, because we were bothered about the effect of estrogen on the growth plate, which can affect the later height of the child. Then the norethistron was then tapered to 5 milligram BD once bleeding stopped. Thyroxine dose was continued at 75 microgram OD as there was a history of missed pills, and iron supplements were added. After 3 days of hospital stay, as she improved clinically, she was discharged with the possible diagnosis of puberty menorrhagia due to, first possibility was anovulatory cycles. That was mainly because that is the most common cause of menorrhagia in adolescents. And second DD was von Willebrand disease type 2B. That was considered because with a platelet count of 47,000, we don't usually expect spontaneous bleeding. And type 2B because that is the type where there can be thrombocytopenia along with bleeding manifestations. The third differential diagnosis was immune thrombocytopenia. So before discharge, that from the blood sample which was collected prior to transfusion was sent for von Willebrand factor quantitative assay as well as ristocetin cofactor assay, and she was discharged with advice to continue norethistron 5 milligram for 20 more days and come back for review on the first day of next cycle. So when she came back 1 month later, she complained of new onset petechia over tongue and upper limbs. Her complete blood count showed a severe thrombocytopenia of 4,000 per millimeter cube, with other cell lines being normal, and von Willebrand factor quantitative assay and ristocetin cofactor assay reports were normal. So because this time she has presented with severe isolated thrombocytopenia with other cell lines being normal and the bone marrow being of adequate functioning. We took a hematology opinion, and final diagnosis of acute on chronic ITP was made, and she was started on steroids, oral prednisolone 1 milligram per kilogram OD with dapsone 100 milligram OD. Norethistron 5 milligram TDS was started for control of menorrhagia and was tapered to 5 milligram BD after 3 days, continued for 20 days. Oral iron supplements were continued, and as a follow-up plan, we were planning to do ANA profile and immunoglobulin profile. This is because ITP is primary ITP is common from 2 to 10 years of age, but when ITP is diagnosed in the adolescent age group, as in this case, it is more likely to be secondary ITP, which can be associated with immunological conditions like SLE and immunodeficiency disorders like CVID, common variable immunodeficiency. So because this child also had DCT3 positive and ANA-IF method positive, we were planning to follow her up to monitor for evolution into immunological disorder or into CVID. But unfortunately, she was lost to follow up. So the final diagnosis is puberty menorrhagia due to anovulatory cycles with an incidental diagnosis of acute on chronic ITP, anemia secondary to blood loss and iron deficiency, and acquired hypothyroidism. Next, I would like to brief on the approach to adolescent girl with menorrhagia. Menstrual flow is excessive when any of the following is present. That is, when flow is more than 7 days, flow is lasting for more than 7 days or more than 80 ml, when it is necessitating changing pad more than every second hourly, causing symptomatic anemia or causing lifestyle disturbances. Causes include endocrine causes like anovulatory cycles, which is the most common cause in this age group. Other endocrine causes include thyroid dysfunction, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Hematological causes include von Willebrand disease, platelet function disorder, immune thrombocytopenia, and other bleeding disorders. Medications like hormonal contraceptives and anticoagulants can also cause menorrhagia. Pregnancy-related causes include miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, gestational trophoblastic disease, and other causes include trauma, infection, malignancy, and structural causes. So history taking is very important in assessing the severity of menorrhagia as well as to come to the correct etiology. So we should take a detailed menstrual history. We need to get information about the impact of the menorrhagia on daily life, like missing school, sports activities, etc. Sexual history and contraception are important because there are pregnancy-related causes. Symptoms of anemia like dizziness, shortness of breath, fatigue, etc. need to be asked for, and also symptoms related to bleeding disorders like epistaxis, bleeding gums, EC bruising, etc. In past history, any history suggestive of coagulopathy, platelet function disorder, or chronic medical conditions need to be asked for. On examining the patient, special attention needs to be given to see if there is hypotension or tachycardia, because these patients can present with hemodynamic instability. We need to look for pallor, petechiae, and bruising. While doing abdominal examination, we need to look for tenderness or pelvic mass. Secondary signs of PCOS need to be looked for, like acne, excess facial or body hair, weight gain. Though local examination is important, pervaginal examination is rarely indicated in adolescents with puberty menorrhagia. So initial investigations include a complete blood count, blood grouping with RH typing, coagulation screen, and a workup for bleeding disorders if suspected, TSH, urine or serum beta HCG, pelvic ultrasound. Now, coming to assessment of severity, in mild cases, the bleeding will last more than normal, that is more than 7 days, or there will be shortened cycles, that is less than 24 days, for more than or equal to 2 months, with slightly or moderately increased menstrual flow and normal hemoglobin, that is usually more than 12 gram per deciliter. Moderate cases will have moderately prolonged, that is more than 7 days of bleeding, or frequent menses every 1 to 3 days, with moderate to heavy flow and reduced hemoglobin, but hemoglobin level will be more than or equal to 10 gram per deciliter. Severe cases will have heavy bleeding with hemoglobin less than 10 gram per deciliter, with or without hemodynamic instability. Moving on to the treatment, mild cases are can be managed with reassurance and observation. Non-hormonal management such as regular NSAIDs and tranexamic acid during menses, along with oral iron supplements. Moderate cases can be managed with tranexamic acid during menses, along with hormonal therapy, which includes combined OCP or oral progesterone only hormonal therapy, and along with oral iron supplements. In case of severe menorrhagia, we need to first ensure that IV access is present, and we need to get an IV access, and in case of hemodynamic instability, go for fluid boluses and further resuscitation. Start on IV tranexamic acid, hormonal therapy, high dose norepinephrine can be used, iron infusion as required. PRBC may be transfused if hemodynamic instability continues in spite of fluid resuscitation. Now, into a little bit detail about the non-hormonal management. First is NSAIDs. NSAIDs reduce menstrual blood loss by 30 to 50%. Mefenamic acid is the most commonly used drug, which is given at 500 milligram TDS. They reduce the prostaglandin levels by inhibiting cyclooxygenase, and thereby improve platelet aggregation and degranulation, and increase vasoconstriction. NSAIDs, when given, it is seen that there is an increase of hemostatic plugs and fewer blood vessels without plugs. It also relieves dysmenorrhea. Tranexamic acid is an anti-fibrinolytic agent which prevents fibrinolysis by inhibiting endometrial plasminogen activator. It decreases menstrual flow by 25 to 50% and is given at a dosing of 15 to 25 milligram per kilogram 2 to 3 times a day, with the maximum dose being 1 gram. Hormonal management. In anovulatory uterine bleeding and sustained acyclic estrogen secretion, bleeding occurs when the endometrium proliferates beyond the ability of endogenous estrogen to maintain the integrity of endometrium. Exogenous estrogen or progestin permits additional endometrial proliferation, which heals the sites of endometrial bleeding and provides hemostasis. Administration of progestin also stabilizes the endometrial lining. Progestins which are commonly used are norepinephrine and medroxyprogesterone acetate. Norethistron is used at 5 to 10 milligram and can be given 3 times daily for 10 days and weaned slowly. Medroxyprogesterone acetate can be given at 10 to 20 milligram 3 times per day for 10 days and then weaned. Combined OCPs, commonly used one is ethinyl estradiol 30 microgram plus levonorgestrel 150 microgram. So it is given as one pill every 4 to 6 hourly until bleeding subsides, usually within 24 hours, and then one pill every 8 hourly for 3 days, and one pill every 12 hourly for two weeks, and then one pill per day since then, till the anemia has fully resolved. And then after the anemia is fully resolved, she is allowed to have a withdrawal bleed. That is by discontinuing the drug for at least 3 days. Take-home messages are that heavy menstrual bleeding at menarche and in adolescence is usually due to anovulatory cycles, but it may be an important sentinel for an underlying bleeding disorder. Examination of a patient with acute heavy menstrual bleeding must include assessment of hemodynamic stability. Thank you.
That was a very nice presentation, Dr. Rehana. Well done. And like Dr. Shaila mentioned that Dr. Rehana is a DNB student, and I must say she's presented wonderfully and she wasn't very nervous, fortunately. So we have a couple of questions here, Rehana. One is that platelets of 45,000 might not cause spontaneous bleeding, but can, oh, it went away. Sorry, just a second. I lost the, yeah. But it can prolong ongoing menstrual bleed. In this case, even ovulatory cycles will be heavy till ITP remits. Could oral Trenexa be started early to help for later cycles as opposed to the need for progesterone? So, would you like to, or should I go ahead? So I agree that yes, we could try use Trenexa, yes, but I think at that point of time, it was important to control the bleeding because the child had severe anemia. And I don't think there was much of an option, but yes, as the hemoglobin has improved, now one could give it a try, especially, depends on what the parents also want. And I'm not sure what happened after a month. Was she having excess bleeding, a little bit of bleeding that time too, right?
Yes, ma'am, because she presented to us, she was asked to present to us on day 1 of her cycle. She didn't have excessive bleeding, but we started on norethistron early, so it got controlled.
Okay. And then there's another question. Can PCOS be a cause for menorrhagia in this case?
Yes, ma'am, it could be a cause because the child was in the overweight. Child was overweight and she had mild acanthosis. That could be a cause, but we have taken anovulatory cycles as the first option because that is the most common cause of bleed in this age group.
Yeah, PCOS will not present with menorrhagia, and we usually don't make a diagnosis of PCOS at menarche. So
yes,
unlikely. And then there's another question: would we switch to OCPs given the risk of recurrence of menorrhagia while she's on the treatment for ITP? So I think we have kind of answered that question. Yes, you could try Trenexa, you could, and if it does not help, then we could switch over to OCPs. Yes, definitely.